Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. I'm your last speaker, I think, unless somebody else gets on the board afterwards. I want to thank my fellow council members for their comments tonight. In September 2014, the previous council asked George Rusté to investigate the process in the administration of the Southwest Quadrant project. Before I offer my recommendations on this report, I think it's important to acknowledge the paralyzing impact of this investigation and what it's wrought on City Hall. When I decided to run for mayor, I promised that following the election, we would implement a plan that would raise the bar to meet transparency and accountability expectations of the citizens of Brampton. To regain public trust, I called in an auditor to review the City of Brampton's books in order to give residents, businesses, and council clarity regarding the real status of Brampton's finances. In my platform, I also promised to address concerns with the city's procurement processes by ensuring that policies and practices were put in place that meet the needs of the city while respecting taxpayers. In order to boost public confidence in local governance, we need to have an honest conversation about what's working, what isn't, and get all the facts on the table. Over the last few years, this city has faced a number of situations that I believe have compromised the public's respect and trust in our organization and for those who hold elected office. Over the short time I've been leading City Hall, I've become increasingly aware of a seriously toxic and dysfunctional work environment. There's been a lot of finger pointing and allegations of wrongdoing, in particular regarding the process and the project that we've discussed this evening. From my perspective, it seems that city staff have shouldered the lion's share of the blame. I strongly believe that the vast majority of staff that work at the City of Brampton are hardworking, trustworthy, and dedicated. This investigation arose after allegations were made that some staff demonstrated favoritism, that they made decisions without proper authority, that they miscalculated or misrepresented costs, or that they failed in their duty to advise council of problems, and worse yet, they intentionally misled council. In the present situation, processes and protocols were put in place to protect the city from political bias and interference. The Auditor General's report finds that while this framework addressed the mechanics of the processes, this did little to address the concerns over what saw as an untested and highly secretive process. So how do we move forward? We need to learn from our experiences and find solutions so it doesn't happen again, and then move on to deliver results and rebuild the trust of the public. Staff wasn't the only group accused of wrongdoing. There were questions of council members being lobbied and causing undue influence. There were allegations of bias and paybacks. At the end of the day, the competitive dialogue negotiations and the accompanying reports and recommendations to council were delivered by some of the city's most experienced and senior staff. The previous council received advice from a number of independent and expert consultants in order to inform their decision-making. Council explicitly and implicitly delegated staff substantial responsibility in the conduct of the process. Despite the desire of council to transfer risks and potential cost overruns associated with this project to the private sector, the city, and more importantly, council, bears the ultimate political risks associated with these types of projects. At the same time, our staff and council were placed under suspicion too, so too was the interim Auditor General himself. Mr. Rusté conducted a time-consuming investigation and reviewed thousands of pages of documents, only to be accused of having a conflict of interest, and many are now questioning the integrity of the investigation. Nearly 5 years ago, City Council, under the leadership of the former Mayor Susan Fennell, decided to issue a request for proposals to commence a project which launched our city into a competitive dialogue process. 3 companies initially participated in this process. Ultimately, 1 bid was disqualified, and this matter is currently the subject of a legal action in the Ontario Superior Court of Justice, in which the City of Brampton is represented by legal counsel retained by our insurers to defend this action. This report was intended to address 7 broad areas of concern raised by both council and the public. First, concerns regarding the process and whether it was in compliance with principles of procurement. Secondly, concerns regarding the fairness of the procurement process. Third, concerns about the final cost and value. 4, questions about why the competitive dialogue process was chosen. 5, questions as to why there was so much secrecy around the bidding process. 6, questions as to whether there was compliance with the city's purchasing bylaws and council policies. And lastly, concerns regarding a lack of public input. The interim Auditor General, for the most part, has indicated satisfaction with the process and the administration of the Southwest Quadrant process. Mr. Restier stated that it was difficult to arrive at recommendations which would be of assistance in dealing with future transactions of this nature, since the Southwest Quadrant was unique and the likelihood of a project of this magnitude and complexity arising again is somewhat low. Frankly, I find it unfortunate that after almost 8 months of investigation, there are no substantive recommendations from the Interim Auditor General. Earlier this year, you will recall that Jim McCarter conducted a financial review of the City of Brampton, and in his report he addressed the financing of the Southwest Quadrant project. Mr. McCarter said he believed the taxpayers would want the city to finance infrastructure projects in whichever manner costs them the least. I agree. Over the course of this investigation into the Southwest Quadrant project, we learned that the City Council chose to finance the new building through a 25-year lease to own P3 financing contract. Furthermore, the decision to go this route was largely driven by the previous council's direction to senior staff that no external debt be used to finance the construction. What lessons can be learned from this decision? I think it's clear. Council must be better aware of the importance of project governance and that a debt-free philosophy should not override doing what will ultimately be the best value for taxpayers. When I began my comments, I indicated I would be offering some recommendations so that we can move forward. As many of you know, I've had preliminary discussions with the Ontario Ombudsman, Mr. Marin, regarding Bill 8, and my desire to have him visit Brampton and review our day-to-day processes. Until the regulation passes, I offer the following suggestions. The first, and it will be a motion that we'll discuss the following my presentation, that the Mayor be directed to request the Province of Ontario to appoint the Ombudsman of Ontario to initiate an inquiry into the affairs of the Corporation of the City of Brampton, and in particular, into potential misconduct in procurement, real estate, planning approvals, and any other area. Secondly, the Ombudsman of Ontario has long recommended that municipalities need to improve the overall transparency and accountability in their meeting practices by keeping better records, including making and properly storing audio and video recordings of closed or in-camera sessions. In March of this year, the City of Brampton removed the $250 fee previously charged to residents requesting investigations into closed-door or in-camera meetings. In the interest of seeking best practices, I intend to bring forward a notice of motion to the May 20th Council meeting to initiate the practice of making digital audio recordings of all in-camera or closed meetings in order to demonstrate the City of Brampton's commitment to better and good governance. Years from now, the City of Brampton and the Southwest Quadrant Renewal Project will serve as a case study. There will be lessons to be learned. Ultimately, I believe the former Mayor and Council wanted to be trailblazers with a signature building in our downtown core we could all be proud of. We did, in fact, blaze a trail. And now municipalities will be understandably more cautious with the procurement process used in major projects given our experience. I personally believe any approach to municipal procurement, regardless of the method or type, should be based on clear understanding and broader public awareness of accountabilities and expectations for the members, individually and together as a council, the staff and the public. Why? I make that suggestion because I believe it's easier to manage the relationships between participants and to understand better their respective roles in circumstances where projects cannot be compromised through lobbying and politicization. Transparency and accountability in government must be more than a commitment to better inform the public. It's a way of doing business that builds public trust. Strong ethical leadership is necessary to shape the culture of City Hall, which is particularly important as our city grows and the challenges we face become more complex. It's crucial we have rules, guidelines, and systems in place to ensure our leaders discharge their responsibilities in a way that reflects the values of our community. Brampton has been lagging behind other similarly sized cities, and these recommendations, I believe, will assist in making our city more accountable and transparent in the years ahead. Thank you.